Okay, video games in 2021. I have played quite a few games this year, no less than 12, in fact. And to be fully honest, I would prefer to do like a top 10 or even a top 5 list. But truthfully, there weren't 10 good games that really came out this year, unless you want to count indies, and I never talk about indies. And I would do a top 5, but I feel that certain games that I missed this year that are locked off the certain platforms like the Nintendo Switch or the PlayStation 5, because I didn't play those games, obviously I can't put them on any best list of the year because I didn't experience them for myself. Certain games I'm talking about would be like Metroid Dread, for example, or Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. There are certain games I would have played this year if I actually had access to the system that those particular games were released on. With that said, I still played, like I said, no less than 12 video games, brand new, that came out this year, and I most certainly do have a top 3. So without wasting any more time, I want to discuss these 3 games and why I found them to be enjoyable. And that's what I'm basing the list on. Not quality per se, but did I personally enjoy the games myself? And in which particular order did I enjoy them over the other? That's what I'm basing this list off of.
At number 3, I have Halo Infinite. And the great thing about Halo Infinite is that it's actually a return to form, and it reverses a critical mistake that nearly tanked the series with the release of Halo 5. This game actively goes out of its way to reverse certain decisions that was made with Halo 5 in regards to its story and gameplay, while at the same time introducing something that the series has never done before, which is present a Halo game in an open world format, which this game does a pretty damn good job of, because it doesn't go out of its way to try and be like a Far Cry or something like that. There were a lot of things that returned here that reminded me why I'm a Halo fan. There's a lot of different weapons that returned, enemies that returned, vehicles that returned. But the thing that won me over was that this game did focus on the story of Master Chief and Cortana, which Master Chief and Cortana are Halo at, its core. I don't believe that you can have a Halo game at this point without Master Chief or Cortana. And this game definitely focused heavily on those two characters for its narrative. Another thing is that the multiplayer was actually pretty enjoyable for this game. The only thing that they messed up really is the progression system. And, beyond the progression system, there were some features that's missing, but they're putting those features in. Co-op is coming, for example. Forge mode is coming. They've already made some changes to the progression system, and I'd imagine that there's going to be more changes coming to the progression system to improve it over what they had in the beta before the official campaign actually released. This definitely was a very enjoyable experience for me, and I'm glad that Microsoft has finally released something that I can say is good, because the last several Microsoft games that have released over the last few years, from Crackdown 3 to Gears 5 to even The Medium, which was released earlier this year, right at the beginning of 2021. A lot of the games that have come out for the Xbox have been below the belt as far as the quality that one should expect from a big games publisher and console manufacturer like Microsoft. Halo Infinite is most definitely a very enjoyable experience. But what I'm hoping is that Microsoft will continue this trend for, their other franchises. Because even though Halo is their most important IP, they have other quality IP that absolutely need addressing as far as, their quality goes. Gears of War, for example, I would love to see a game is a return to form for Gears of War, because Gears 5 was not. That's not what anyone should expect from, a Gears of War title. But I'll save that for a future video. At number 2, Guardians of the Galaxy. So after the release the very piss poor release of Marvel's Avengers by Square Enix, which the reason that game ultimately failed and why the player base fell off is because they tried to create a live service game, for one, but they also didn't really have any long term content that would keep players around. Not to mention, the game itself was very poorly developed, from the combat system to just simple mechanics. The level design wasn't creative or intuitive in any way, and it just wasn't a good game overall. It was another attempt for Square Enix to try and make money off of a popular IP, and they had also done the same thing with Dissidia NT for the Final Fantasy franchise. Guardians of the Galaxy is the complete opposite of what Marvel's Avengers and Dissidia NT were. It's entirely a single player game. There's no multiplayer of any kind in it, which was a fantastic decision. Not every game needs multiplayer. It does not have any microtransactions of any kind. The combat system, while simple, is actually very fun and flashy. There is some strategy involved with the combat system. But the thing that's really great is the presentation and the way the game is written. The game has a pretty damn good story, but most of all, it's the way that the characters were actually written, the actual Guardians themselves. The banter and whatnot and the interactions with the characters is top notch. And I actually read that the development team didn't even really write the majority of this game. The majority of the dialogue, around 80% of it, actually comes from the fans. And that's fantastic. I think development studios should include the fans more, considering it's their experience at the end of the day. And without the fans, you really don't have anything. You have no product to sell. So it was great to see a game that was themed after the Guardians of the Galaxy presented in a fashion that's similar to like the Batman Arkham series or the Insomniac Spider-Man games from a developer who clearly cares about the property. And the fact that this was released by Square Enix is really head-scratching, because Square Enix ruins almost everything they touch. So hopefully this game will mark a shift for Square Enix and they'll actually start to give a damn and release actual good games. Now, personally, I highly doubt it. I think this game is an anomaly, one that's not going to happen too often with Square Enix, but I've been surprised before, so we'll see. And my number one favorite game of 2021 is Resident Evil Village. Now, when it comes to Resident Evil Village, when I made my retrospective for it earlier this year, I basically said that it is a good game. The story is absolutely ridiculous. I didn't think they did a great job with the story at all. But it ended on a very intriguing note that's obviously going to lead into the next Resident Evil game, whatever, Resident Evil 9 turns out to be. Or unless they go for a spin-off direction, which I don't think they will. But aside from the story, gameplay-wise, this had everything of what you would expect from a Resident Evil game. Sure, there were other weak aspects to it. The puzzles weren't exactly as in-depth as they could have been, but at the same time, they weren't as annoying as they could have been as well. The second half of the game certainly wasn't as strong as the first half, but it was still pretty damn good. And the new characters that they had in here were actually very interesting. And Capcom, I believe, is the only publisher this year that's offered DLC for free. They're in the process of working on the DLC, the story DLC for Resident Evil Village, and you won't have to pay for it. And that's a nice turnaround because I do not like how they handled the Virgil DLC for Devil May Cry 5. Now, I won't say that Resident Evil Village is the best game that came out this year, but I will say that it is definitely the most enjoyable that I've played personally. And even though I feel that Resident Evil 7 is the better game between the two, Resident Evil Village was still a very enjoyable experience. And it's the game that had the best replayability this year. According to my Steam, I put around 80 hours into this game or whatever, and I earned all the achievements for it. Like I said, very enjoyable experience, and I'm looking forward to seeing where the series goes next. Moving to the worst list, at number 3, I have Tales of Arise. And quite frankly, I'm sick and tired of JRPGs. I'm really fucking sick and tired of JRPGs. When you have a game that's over 30 hours long, which this particular game is over 60 hours long, and you actively demand that much time and attention from the player, you better have a damn good story to tell. And the problem with most modern JRPGs, well, just about all modern JRPGs with the exception of one, is that these games do not have good stories anymore. With Tales of Arise in particular, the characters in this game were extremely underdeveloped, aside from Dol Halim and Kisara. The story completely abandons its central theme during the last third of its runtime, and beyond that, to make it even worse, the game throws in this pedophile romance subplot that doesn't even make any sense and is absolutely ridiculous between the two central leading characters. The boss fights were deliberately poorly developed, so Bandai Namco can make money off of microtransactions that give the player experience boosters and various items that they shouldn't have in their inventory under normal circumstances at the start of a new game. And that's not even counting the cosmetic DLC, which is overpriced and shouldn't be made for sale, should just be included in the game as is. And if I really wanted to get picky, this game really doesn't introduce anything new to the genre. Everything Tales of Arise does was taken from some other game, including its cooking and camping mechanics, which obviously were taken directly from Final Fantasy XV, its fishing minigame, which has been seen in other video games, such as Nier Automata and Final Fantasy XV. The side quests added absolutely nothing to the story, or the world, or the characters, or anything that should be important. And all in all, this game was just one big, gigantic waste of time. The fact that this game ended up on some of the best of lists of the year only points to the fact that both critics and fans alike have very low expectations and a high tolerance for bullshit. And the fact that this game was also named number 1 for Best RPG of the Year only goes to show how weak RPGs have been this year. Because this game shouldn't be included on any best of list, let alone win in any category. As much as I wanted to like this game, I'm glad that I don't have a tolerance for garbage. And that's what this game was. Garbage. I can't really take seriously anyone that names Tales of Arise to be their best or their favorite game of the year. I can't take you serious. At number 2 of my top 3 worst games list for 2021, I have Aliens Fireteam Elite. And this game was just, I don't know what this game was. I know what this game was trying to be, but it just came off as extremely lazy. There were some very bad design choices that made their way into this game. For one, I don't think the mechanics themselves, which were clearly inspired by Gears of War, were designed properly. The fact that the development team that worked on this, which I believe is Cold Iron Studios, the fact that they put a limit on how much the player can actually barrel roll doesn't really make any sense, because that's how you avoid most of your damage in like the Gears of War series. With this game, which clearly takes its inspiration from Gears of War, why would you put a limit on barrel rolling? And then there's other lazy aspects like what they did with the character models. The fact that you have characters that are apparently talking, but their mouths aren't moving. That's just a blatant sign of a low-quality, cheap effort. That shouldn't be. I hate what they did with the card system. This game, of course, has a card system, which has been a staple feature since the original Titanfall. And other games have copied that system since and haven't done anywhere near as good of a job as the original Titanfall since. Where in this game, you have these cards where you're given challenges to complete. And if you don't complete that challenge successfully, then you lose that card, along with the rewards that comes with that card, if you were to complete it successfully. The biggest problem, though, with this game is the AI. Your AI companions in this game is some of the worst that I've seen. They cannot take care of themselves, not for 2 seconds, it seems. Especially if you're playing the game on really any difficulty above easy. If you try and play this game on hard with just you and your AI companions, you will lose, guaranteed, every single time, because of how terribly designed your AI companions are. And to make matters even worse, they don't have a checkpoint system in this game, so every time you die, you have to restart that particular level from the beginning. And it's that poor decision that really made this game a lot more repetitive than it had any right to be. Certain things that's wrong with Aliens Fireteam Elite could have easily have been fixed. But of course, the development team had their heads stuck straight up their ass. And I was completely out of my wits with this game, more than 10 hours in, when the game only has less than a handful of campaigns, divided into 3 missions each that are only 20 minutes long. It's as if some of these design choices made it into this game because they were trying to extend the length. Very, very sad, especially coming off of another title that's based off of the Aliens franchise. It seems that this series will never get a good game. And no, Alien Isolation wasn't good either. Still waiting for a developer to come along and make something that's actually good for that particular series. Until then, Aliens Fireteam Elite is garbage. Number 1, worst game that I've played this year in 2021. Bright Memory Infinite. I just don't understand what the hell the development team was thinking with this game. Because this is not a game. It may look like a game, it may feel like a game, but it's not a game. What this is a tech demo for the Xbox Series X. This piece of software was created to show off the graphical capabilities of the Xbox Series X. That's the only reason why it exists at all. Nothing in this game made sense. The story didn't make any sense. I didn't care about the main character or what she was trying to accomplish, which I'm positive was nothing at the end of the day. I didn't give a shit about the ancient Asian architecture and themes or whatever that they tried to insert into this, which didn't make any sense, especially when it's combined with the futuristic, sci-fi, militaristic aspect that they also shoved into this piece of software. I certainly didn't give a shit about the mediocre gunplay, or the even worse stealth mechanics that they had in here, or the rip-off Shadow Warrior melee combat that they had in this game. I just didn't give a shit. But the worst part about it is that the game is only an hour and 30 minutes long. It's less than 2 hours in length. This reminds me of the Resident Evil 3 remake that people were bitching about back in 2020. When a company like Capcom is known for making their games highly replayable, the whole design philosophy of games like Devil May Cry and Resident Evil is that once you finish them for the first time, you're encouraged to go back through on higher difficulty settings and replay them again to unlock special rewards. This game didn't even have that. This game didn't even have a quality replayability factor. Nor did it have a purpose or point in regards to storytelling, or even gameplay, considering it steals most of its ideas from other games that do the same thing that Bright Memory Infinite tries to do, but far better. As I already stated, this was not a game. This was a tech demo, and not a very good one at that. A far better tech demo would be something like Killzone Shadowfall on the PS4. And even though that game was mediocre as shit too, at least that game was far longer than 1 hour and a half in runtime. Bright Memory Infinite is a complete piece of shit. And I can't imagine any other game that came out this year ending up on my number 1 spot than this for the worst games that's been released in 2021. And so that concludes the list. My top 3 best games and my top 3 worst games of 2021. And I'm actually looking forward to 2022. There's a lot of big games that are coming out next year. For anyone who is wondering what games that I'm going to cover on this channel, or that I at least plan to cover on this channel, you should take a look at the community tab, because I did post an update for that several days ago, as far as which 2022 games I plan to play and cover on the channel. So definitely check that out. But until then, it's been a solid year, and I'm looking forward to next year.